Tsorpo Monastery in Tibet in 1998. Numerous visitors come here daily, 16,000 feet up, to see His Holiness Karmapa. Karmapa came to Tsorpo in June 1992. The arduous reconstruction work started in 1985 has made amazing progress. After 40 years of devastation and subjugation, proper spiritual teaching has been re-established. A new generation of Tibetans can now practice Buddhism again, in spite of oppression. There are more than 108 monks now. Because of Karmapa's rebirth in Tibet and the recognition in which he is held, Tsorpo has successfully remained the center of the main ancient school of Buddhism, the Karma Kagyu, that was founded here by the first Karmapa almost 900 years ago. The school of the Dalai Lama only came into being 250 years later. Back then, the monks here lived in almost exactly the same conditions as they do today, leading spiritual lives to free themselves from material dependence. The young Karmapa is a shining role model to them. In his development, he is the direct successor of his great spiritual forebears. His teacher, Nyapo, serves him merely as a help for reflection and for recollection of his spiritual heritage. Visitors from all over Tibet make arduous journeys in buses and trucks to come to Tsorpo, just to be able to catch the slightest glimpse of Karmapa. Doing so inspires them with a powerful confidence and a great love of life. Nevertheless, the pilgrims have to be cautious because they must never reveal that Buddhism means more to them than the Chinese occupying forces, whose civilian spies are ever present. When Karmapa makes public appearances, it becomes a ceremonial rite, with musical accompaniment on shawns. Limping along beside him, wearing a white shawl, is his teacher, Nyapo, a confidant who, in his day, also worked for the 16th Karmapa in Tsorpo. Karmapa is unusually tall for his age of 15. He has no problems with the role of a religious leader, even during these difficult times of occupation. With hardly any contribution from the state, he succeeds in pressing ahead with the reconstruction of his monastery. 150 workers are employed in this ambitious reconstruction work in traditional Tibetan style. Around 800 monks used to study in Tsorpo before it was destroyed, and donations from all over the world are aimed at making that possible once again. An advantage is that the 16th Karmapa has been sowing the seeds of the Buddhist liberation movement in the West since as long ago as 1974. For the third time in its almost 900-year-old history, Tsorpo is being rebuilt. Without Karmapa's rebirth in Tibet and his rapid enthronement as religious leader at the age of just 7, Tsorpo would still be lying in ruins now. The reconstruction work not only contains the teaching section and the structures, but also the traditional layout of the monastery. Each structural ornament has spiritual significance. More money is spent on these than for the actual building work itself. Our film Living Buddha, advertised here in the temple, and the accompanying book to the film should be contributing toward the continuity and expansion of Karmapa's spiritual line. The reconstruction forms a smooth transition with the traditional pre-Chinese concept of art in Tibet, And here, Karmapa has invited and motivated numerous artists. With his blessing and his careful attention to every detail, he is in a position to launch a huge community effort in the face of all resistance and to make it a success. Nevertheless, he cannot simply ignore the global political conditions that currently prevail. The Chinese are omnipresent, even if they seem superficially invisible to visitors. In reality, the monastery is under Chinese supervision day and night, with more or less effectively disguised spies and official visits by high functionaries of the Chinese Communist Party. They always have to be given a grand welcome each time. They are the rulers, with control over the monastery and over Karmapa's everyday life. This man is China's most senior representative for the monastery. With a large workforce of employees, he is in charge of completing the political project Karmapa for the occupying forces. He brings senior guests of honor up here to the monastery. The idea is that Karmapa should be manipulated for the strategy of the Chinese. By acknowledging Karmapa and celebrating him, the Chinese want to portray themselves as tolerant rulers who are quite prepared to allow Tibetans to keep their religion and their culture. This is why Karmapa has to welcome important delegations from China and abroad, all in the interests of promoting liberal Chinese politics. I managed to meet with Karmapa's family outside the monastery with no Chinese spies around. This is Karmapa's sister. She is closest to him. The family has always known how volatile Karmapa's role is. The more the Chinese monopolize her brother with the power of their global media, the more dangerous the situation will become for both of them. Perhaps even at this stage, his sister was already contemplating escaping from Tibet, which she did 3 months before her brother. Today, from what Karmapa told us in Tsurphu in the fall of 1999, we can sense that he was already thinking of escaping too. I am still very young, so I cannot yet achieve as much as my predecessor, but I will not disappoint the expectations that have been placed on me. We only discovered what he truly meant by that on January 5th, 2000 in the world press. Karmapa had informed the Chinese that on the evening of December 28, 1999, he would begin a 3-week period of retreat in his room. Instead, he lowered himself down from his room 4 stories up on a rope. Undetected, he met his driver and his teacher in a jeep outside the monastery. In a village, they picked up a second driver and then drove westward non-stop for 3 days, a total of 900 miles. On foot, they make it over one of the highest pass routes in the Himalayas. And on the first day of the new millennium, they arrive in Mustang, Nepal. From there, a helicopter takes them to a location near Kathmandu, where they take a taxi as far as the Indian border. On the other side, they board a train that arrives 2 days later in Delhi, where they again take a taxi journey lasting 12 hours as far as Dharamsala, the seat of the Dalai Lama. There, they announce their successful escape.
Buddhist leader Karmapa Lama walks across the Himalayas for an historic
The news is reported by all the world's major television networks and comes as a serious shock to China.
Exile, the Dalai Lama. The two met at the Dalai Lama's headquarters in northern India.
The dramatic flight of the Karmapa Lama from Tibet has sent shockwaves through the region. A key figure, the 14-year-old...
Karmapa can finally prove whose spiritual child he really is. China's entire strategy of trying to use him for its own purposes has collapsed.
So far, the Dalai Lama has avoided...
For the 15-year-old Karmapa is pursuing his own strategy, and not even the powerful Chinese can stop him. Protected by Indian guards, he finally manages to make personal contact with the man he so admires, the Dalai Lama. Full of joy, the Dalai Lama presents him to the public as the new hope for Tibet. He supports him without making any distinctions between their different sects within Tibetan Buddhism. What is important to him is the spiritual wisdom that connects everyone and everything for the sake of international peace. And to spread that message and be taken seriously by the world as a peace emissary, one has to be powerfully charismatic. Teacher Nyapo reports to the Dalai Lama that the very fact of their successful escape, during which Karmapa carried him when the going got tough, is proof of Karmapa's Buddhahood. The Dalai Lama had no need of meeting Karmapa personally to know all along that Karmapa is indeed the living Buddha. Karmapa has all the attributes of a fully realized being. They include the fact that he predicted his own reincarnation in writing, which was confirmed by two members of his line, Situ Rinpoche and Gyatso. The 14th Dalai Lama and the 17th Karmapa, 50 years his junior. Thanks to Japanese donations, a monastery was promptly erected in the immediate vicinity of the Dalai Lama for Karmapa to occupy. 4 years later, he was joined by monks. Karmapa and his companions will live on the upper floor until the day he receives a residence of his own. Here, too, he was guarded day and night by over 100 soldiers. The Indians wanted to prevent any Chinese secret agents from possibly taking revenge for the loss of face. Despite this, friends, with whom he already founded numerous Buddhist centers in his previous incarnation, come to see him from all over the world. At first, Karmapa gives each of them his blessing. As he does so, he is, of course, flanked by an Indian Secret Service officer who casts a critical eye over every single one of Karmapa's visitors. They include, most importantly, Situ and Gyatso Rinpoche, who represented the Karma Kagyu order worldwide during the 20 years between the death of the 16th Karmapa and the reinvestiture of the 17th. Although he is not yet of age, he fulfills his important spiritual duties after his flight from communism through the Iron Wall with dignity and great self-confidence. The press find it especially difficult to get access to him because India wants nothing published that might irritate China. The only reporters allowed through are those who pay due attention to this problem. The Chinese have already indirectly threatened India with war if it fails to extradite Karmapa to them. For this reason, the foreign minister of the Dalai Lama is always present at all of Karmapa's public appointments, especially when the representatives of all the Kagyu centers all over the world meet Karmapa for the first time. Coming here to northern India is far easier than visiting occupied Tibet, where the Chinese would never have tolerated an international meeting of this kind. Now, Karmapa can continue with his task of bringing Buddhism to the West, a task he began in his earlier incarnation in 1974. He still has no passport, but will probably be given one soon when he comes of age. And then, hopefully, we will also be able to welcome him to Europe.